With the Indian economy yet to recover fully from the shocks of two COVID-19 waves, all eyes were on the government's spending on the rural and agriculture sectors, besides social sector expenditure on health and education. It turns out that in the case of the former, the budget estimates for FY23 have seen only marginal growth over revised estimate for FY22. And in the case of the latter, though the government has promised to spend larger sums than last year in absolute terms, the spending as a proportion to GDP is rather small. The centre plans to spend 1,51,521 crore rupees on agriculture and allied activities in FY23, which is a modest 2.54% increase over the revised estimate for FY22. On rural development, the plan is to spend 2,06,293 crore rupees next year, which is 0.32% less than that in FY22. The budget for the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, which is one of the flagship schemes to provide temporary rural employment, has been maintained at the same level as last year's budget estimate, which was 73,000 crore rupees. The hope had been that the centre would allocate a higher sum this year, given the precarious state of rural consumption and growth story. But Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman resisted that, perhaps on the hope of growth picking up across all segments of the economy. How far and by how much will this come true will be known in the months to come. A revival is all the more important as data show that rural wage growth has seen a very long and continuous degrowth in the past few years. And unless wages and income rise in rural sectors, demand for mass-consumed products will continue to be stressed. Coming to another big social sector spend, education, the allocation of 1 trillion rupees in FY23 is 18.5% higher than the revised estimate for FY22. But an analysis of budget documents shows that it is still only 0.4% of GDP. The education expenditure in FY22, according to revised estimates, was 88,002 crore rupees, or 0.3% of GDP. The decline has been consistent in the past few years, from 0.55% of GDP in 2014-15 to 0.43% in 2018-19. Just before the pandemic, it had been 0.45%, and we are talking about allocations here. The actual spending on education has in fact been lower than budgeted in 7 of the past 8 years. The centre's spending on healthcare has been somewhat better, but still nowhere close to the combined centre-state target of 2.5% of GDP by 2025. The centre's expenditure on health, on the other hand, has seen a marginal increase of 0.8% from 85,915 crore rupees in revised estimate for FY22 to 86,606 crore rupees in the budget estimate for FY23. As a proportion of GDP, there has in fact been a decline from 0.37% to 0.33%.
The roots of the economic crisis lie in the period even before the pandemic, over the last 4 5 years, where we have seen rising inequality, very high rates of unemployment, probably even increasing absolute poverty, as well as a slowdown in economic growth. And the pandemic has most likely made all of this worse based on the various reports that we are seeing. In this context, the expectation from the budget was that there would be an increase in government spending. However, the budget disappoints because we see that the overall government expenditure has fallen slightly as a proportion of the GDP. And if we break it up to see where allocations have increased and reduced, there is an increase in allocation as far as capital expenditure goes, which is desirable. But if you look at the allocations within capital expenditure, it has gone largely to the national highways, railways, and so on, where the likelihood of employment generation is weaker. On the other hand, welfare allocations for schemes such as the public distribution system, for the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, for the Health Ministry, for Women and Child Development, for school midday meals, all of these we see that have not increased in real terms at all. And in most, we see actually a decline in allocations in terms of if we account for inflation as well. Now, this is a serious concern in this context where we are talking about the bottom quintile not being a part of the economic recovery that we are seeing, where social protection plays a very important role in even keeping them going so that they can actively participate in the labor market. On the other hand, welfare spending also needs to be seen as something that contributes to increasing demand because it puts money directly in the hands of people who have a higher propensity to spend, and therefore welfare spending could also be a contribution to reviving the economy in this context of a demand deficit economy.
The coming year will show whether Nirmala Sitharaman's gamble of putting long-term growth ahead of immediate needs for boosting consumption will pay off.
If you like this video, share it and subscribe to Business Standard. For more news, views and insights, log on to www.business-standard.com. Do also follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Telegram and LinkedIn.